Welcome to the Have More Fun podcast. In this episode, I talk with Amanda Cant about what to say to someone who is grieving, how to become an advocate for your children, and why telling your story helps others to own theirs.
I thank them for that because they didn't give up. They kept trying. Even if they said the most god-awful thing, they kept trying. And that to me meant more than someone just not being there at all. Dropped my purse on the floor and just started bolting towards her room. And the charge nurse stops me like, no, Amanda, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I'm like, there's a million people. Looks like a Grey's Anatomy episode in her room. Like, what's happening? Why would you fight the doctors? They went to college. They did all these studying. Like, what makes you think you know more?
I spent a few hours raking leaves in my yard last weekend. The air is still warm here in Denver, but the crisp, icy mornings declare that winter is right around the corner. It feels like one of those in-between times when you feel the already but not yet quality of the seasons. And sometimes that feeling has to do with the weather, but other times it's the state of our lives. In between a job that is drawn to a close and the next one that's not yet clear. In between a huge loss and the inevitable healing that can only come with time. In between one relationship that has ended and a new one that might be on the horizon. Or in between the place you've lived for years and the one you will soon call home. These in-between times, sometimes named interims, or the slightly more beautiful version, interludes, can be exciting, but they can also be difficult, as they demand patience with what is at the moment, while simultaneously wrestling with a longing to know what the future holds. And this idea of in-between times is why I so deeply appreciate John O'Donohue. John was an Irish teacher and poet, and his book titled To Bless the Space Between Us is something I pick up at least once a year. In it, he talks about how blessings can help ease us through all of the different in-between seasons of our life. What O'Donohue says is that speaking a blessing over another person is different from a kind word or a poem. It's actually a powerful prayer that helps the person we're blessing remember who they are in the eyes of God and provides a sense of new possibilities, especially in the in-between times. Blessings remind us to hold our confidence in the goodness of God, to acknowledge that life can be hard, and to anticipate the promise that a new season is coming, which is why I thought I would read a blessing for you right now. It's adapted from To Bless the Space Between Us, and it's called Interim Time. So here is a blessing for whatever in-between time you find yourself in. When you are waiting in an in-between time, stuck in a holding pattern, waiting for the next, for something better, when no place looks like itself and you are unsure of what has been or what might come, in this waning light where everything seems withheld, the path you took to get here is washed out, the way forward is still concealed from you, the old is not old enough to have died away, and the new is still too young to be born. You cannot lay claim to anything in this place of dusk, where your eyes are blurred and there is no mirror. Everyone has lost sight of your heart, and you can see nowhere to put your trust. As far as you can, hold your confidence. Do not allow confusion to squander this call, which is loosening your roots in false ground that you might come free from all you have outgrown. What is being transfigured here is your mind and your soul, and it's difficult and slow to become new. And the more faithfully you can endure here, the more refined your heart will become. For your arrival in the new will eventually be everything you have been waiting for. It will be full flourishing. But until then, may each new day bring unique joy, and may this be the best in-between season you have ever known. Let it be so. My guest today is Amanda Cant, who has had her fair share of in-between seasons. She's weathered loss with bravery and turned obstacles into launching pads. I get to spend my work days sitting not even 10 feet from her, so I know firsthand what an incredible human being she is. Amanda's story is powerful, but it is her tenacity to fight for joy in the midst of every season that inspires me the most. And so without further ado, here is my friend and right-hand lady, Amanda Cant. Okay, Amanda, so almost 4 years ago, You went through an experience that changed your life forever. You learned that you were pregnant with twins. And so will you share a little bit about that season of your life and take us to the day in the hospital when you delivered both girls?
So it was December 2013 when I found out I was pregnant, and me and my husband had decided after having one child, we wanted one more to complete our family. So in January, we went in for our first of 2014, we went in for our first ultrasound, and we had a little surprise. The technician said, well, look what we have. And I just saw two little dots on the screen, and my heart just stopped. And my husband was like, I see a heartbeat, not oblivious to the fact that there was a couple of them. So the technician tells him, no, I see two. And his face just went white, and we were just in shock. It was a complete surprise. They were identical twins. So we went home that night just not knowing what to say or what to do. It was definitely not part of the plan. It wasn't that we thought it was even a possibility. Identical twins actually are a 0.03% chance. They call it a fluke. So It was very exciting, though. It was a surprise to our entire family. But, we always wanted 2 kids, but 3, why not go for one more, right? So, pregnancy was going really well. The doctors told me of the risks of having identical twins. So I had what's called mono-di twins, which means they shared the same sac. They shared the same sac and they shared the same placenta, but they had this membrane that separated them, so they couldn't tangle up basically with their umbilical cords, which is a big win. There's still a very high risk, but it was still very viable pregnancy. So we went through several tests in the beginning, and then they kind of give you a small break, and then they go into weekly checkups. So it was kind of fun. You got to see the twins every week with an ultrasound technician, and the high-risk doctor gets to look at them. And our baby girls were definitely had some personality to them in there. They definitely weren't bored. So several of our ultrasounds going through this were them moving around. I don't think I had an ultrasound where they were not awake. Baby A, which was Ava, she was the feisty one. So she would kick Riley, push off at her stomach, just start fights just in the womb, and it would be right in front of us. And then Riley would stay calm, which was baby B, and she would, get mad and like push herself around and put her butt in her face just to get her away from her. And so it was kind of fun to see them interact and see their personalities at such a young stage. And then, we have video of them waving at us. So we had a lot of excitement in the first 2 semesters in the first and second trimester of my pregnancy. So at 18 weeks, we went in for our usual weekly checkup. Nothing big was going on. I brought my sister and my mom with me, along with my husband, Brandon, and we went in, and the technician we usually always had, he just looked at me and smiled, and I saw her well up with tears. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, I need to get the doctor. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, I can't tell you. I need to get the doctor. And so at that point, we thought it was what's called twin-to-twin transfusion. It's where one of the babies takes too much of the amniotic fluid and too much of the nutrients, and the other baby gets less. So this is something that's very common with identical twins. So we assumed that's what we were at, which means we would have to go through a long process of doctors in other states and procedures. So I said, okay, get the doctor. We're going to be okay. And she looked at me and she started to cry, and I said, we're going to be okay. And she walked out to get the doctor, and me and my husband were talking about what we're going to do with our oldest at that point, because we really thought we were going to have to be traveling. When the doctor came in, he told me that baby A, which was Ava, that her heart has stopped and she had passed away. It was definitely a shock. I didn't believe him. I remember saying that she was fine. I even felt the flutters a couple days prior. So he turned on the machine and he showed me Riley's strong heartbeat, and then he put it on Ava, and there was nothing. So that led us to not only a loss, but a huge decision. Having identical twins means there's a lot of high risk for Riley when one passes away. There's an over 40% chance that she could have severe neurological issues and not a very good quality of life. So at that point, we had to go home making the decision if we were going to continue with the pregnancy with Riley or terminate altogether and lose both the girls. So that was kind of our stage of going through some things. And I remember going home and being angry and upset and sad. And that was a Tuesday. And on Wednesday night, we were laying in bed together crying. And I remember praying and saying, God, like, I need to know what you want right now because I'm mad, I'm angry, I don't know what you want. And I need a clear sign on if I'm supposed to follow through with this pregnancy. Like, if you want me to have this baby, I said, I need a neon sign that says, you need to go through with this and tell me what to do. I didn't want a subtle hint or a little light in the sky. I wanted this big, bright acknowledgement of what I was supposed to do because I said, I can't do this alone. And Brandon can't either. So you need to step up and be there for me as my father. And we went to bed that night, hardly slept. And we went in Thursday to check on Riley. And Riley was her happy self again. She was bouncing around. She waved at us. And she was playing around and kicking and moving and just her happy self again. And that was when I looked at Brandon and said, we need to fight for her. We didn't get to fight for Ava, but we get to fight for Riley. And that's when we started our fight to get her to survive. The next several months were a lot of tests. It had to do with me trying to fit into a child's MRI machine at 8 months pregnant, which let me tell you is a tight squeeze. But, we had a lot of support and it was a roller coaster of feelings going into it. But, we had a support system from church. We had family and the hospital with the nurses and my doctor. I couldn't imagine doing it without them or having them there to guide me going in there because I would go from 1 second of being excited to tears of loss. And it was an interesting road through that process.
Oh my gosh, I can't even fathom having to navigate that whole experience. And so what was it like when you delivered the girls and left the hospital and only had one baby in your arms?
It was almost like going through, there was so much emotion. Like when I delivered, Riley came first. And when they laid her on my stomach, I had tears of joy and was excited. And of course, once you get one eye, you got to get the other one out. There's no break like there was the first time. So, I pushed again and Ava came and I just remember the feeling of my tears changing to exhaustion and sadness and defeat. And they laid her on me and I held them both just crying and just having this wave of emotion. And after a couple minutes, it just calmed. My tears just stopped and I felt neutral. I wasn't sad and I wasn't happy. It was like another day. And as we said our goodbyes to Ava in that room, we were there for a few hours. We got plenty of time with her, which was really nice. But going up to mother baby, I had to leave her there. So they took her then, and me, Riley, and Brandon went up to the mother baby unit. And I remember being in that room, and the nurses were terrified to come in. You can just see them as they creep in the room, like super weird about it. Like everybody was waiting for me to like have this explosion of emotion or anger or something. And it was almost odd because I felt just neutral because I had my baby sitting right here that I needed to feed and change and take care of. I was recovering from delivering two babies. Yet we had people coming in for me to sign papers. So the mortuary can come pick up Ava. So it was like my body didn't know what to do. So it just stayed calm. There was no smiles, but no frowns. It was just neutral. And they would send in, the social workers to check on me, the therapists, and, how are you doing? And, I didn't even know what to say. I guess I'm okay. Like, sure. But they gave me a quick turnaround. I was out in 24 hours, believe it or not. And I remember leaving, and I felt like I forgot something, like what you feel when like you go on vacation and you forget like your toothbrush. Like I felt like something was left at the hospital. Like, what did I forget? And I remember going home and telling my husband, like, I forgot something, and I felt empty. And that was difficult because I was bringing a baby home. And, I try to fool myself by saying like, well, some people don't even get to bring one home, or trying to measure to make, like the situation's always worse. But the reality was I had 2 babies and I was missing one. And that pain was still real and alive in my heart. And I tried not to show it because I didn't want people to judge me on not being grateful for Riley's arrival.
I've heard you speak about this whole experience before, and you shared your story, and without, fail, there were so many other women in the room who were crying along as you were sharing. And I think it's because they totally resonate with your story. And I saw so many women come up and thank you for sharing your experience, because they have felt shame about talking about their own loss, whether through miscarriage or the plethora of other experiences that we can experience loss through. And so why do you think there's so much shame involved in loss sometimes?
Soon after I lost Ava, I felt God calling me to speak about my loss. I was still super broken and angry, and I didn't understand how talking about it would help. But as a mother, our job has always been to protect our child from harm, from anything that comes their way, that we are their protectors from the beginning to the end. And I feel that sometimes I felt shame for not being able to protect Ava. Even though I didn't even know anything was wrong, you still have that deep mothering part of you that feels like you should have been able to save your child. And, I've had doctors tell me over and over again that there was nothing I could have done differently. But it weighs on you as a mom, as a wife, as a woman. You still remember the pain and the hurt, and you always play the what if game of how you could have done something different. But society has given miscarriages and infant loss such a scary discussion that I think women are afraid to talk about it. And that has a lot to do with how society reacts to loss. When people lose their mom or their dad or a sibling, that in itself is hard for people to talk about. But I think just hearing about a child or a baby, whether it be before or after birth, just losing a baby, it's very scary for people to hear. And in that, they've kind of shunned people away from talking about it and kind of burying those feelings. At the time I was going through this, I didn't know how many people that I knew had miscarriages or loss. I felt like I was the only one. So even once I was feeling called to speak about it, I sat down at my computer and just started typing about Ava. I shared my hard moments, the emptiness I felt that came with the loss, the strength that I got from Jesus in my life. And I tried to encourage people, moms on social media, to talk about it. And if they were too afraid to talk about it just with me, I didn't want them to feel that loneliness I felt. And I didn't even know if there was anybody out there that had that, but it just kind of like the words just kind of flowed out. I felt myself kind of healing in the process of me writing this, and I started posting them. And at the same time, I started to get private messages like flowing through my inboxes from people who had lost and felt stuck, or who were scared of loss because they've lost before and they're pregnant again, and have told no one. And people some that I were close to that I had no idea. And it just made me realize that gap we have in our society of the fear of talking about it. But the reality is it's real, and it's often, and it's scary. But it's something that there's no shame. Like, really, it's another type of grieving that I feel that we all need to talk about and be there for as as a tribe, because it's a scary thing. And creating a child is completely a miracle. Everything has to fall exactly into place no matter what you do. And it's not up to us how that happens. It's, something that just miraculously happens. And I just can see that gap we have, that we need to share and care for each other and love each other no matter what.
Were there any things that family or friends did for you during that season that made life just a little bit easier? And then my second question is, how can we come alongside anyone who's going through a season of hurting like that?
I think for me, that made my life easier would definitely, I would have to give a shout out just right off the bat to my two friends, Sarah and Diana. Diana was one of my friends that I met actually in birthing class with my first child. And that's how we became friends. We delivered around the same time. She was in charge of my baby shower for the twins. And I remember when I lost Ava, I wanted to call everything off. I didn't want to celebrate. I didn't want people to be excited. I felt like I didn't deserve this to be showered. I didn't deserve that. And I remember Diana giving me space, listening, staying calm. But she still moved forward with planning Riley's baby shower. She prepared everything that might happen, even if I bailed the last minute. She was a true rock star. She never took my outbursts to heart, which there were plenty. And she was the one that woke up at 4 a.m. to drive me to Los Angeles for my MRI at the Children's Hospital there to see a specialist. So that is just her just being gracious. And then Sarah, she's been my friend since middle school. She was there to listen. She watched my older daughter when getting out of bed just seemed too much on days that that grief just hit me so hard I just couldn't move. She was there to process with me when I was angry at God. And then she was there when I was finding forgiveness and light. She cried with me. She celebrated with me. She hosted Ava's memorial. So I guess like the one thing that you can do to come along someone is just be present. The emotions of it are in such waves, and it's kind of a surprise of the person you're going to get that day. And I know it sounds super simple, but being present is probably the hardest thing you can do in these type of situations. I feel like there's like two routes people take. Either you have the friends and family that like need jobs and they want to clean, make meals, do all these things, the to-dos. And then you have the people that completely disconnect from you. Some people are so uncomfortable with it that they don't call, they don't stop or come over. You completely lose contact with them altogether. And that part was truly heartbreaking for me because some of those people were some of my really close friends, or I thought were. And, you kind of find through that process the people that are there to fight with you, and they're just present. They're there when you're sad. They're there when you're happy. They're there when you need backup. That part is just, you never know what to get that day. And they were willing to make those adjustments to help. And I think it's just, this fear of something so heartbreaking that people just run from it. But those people that stayed there were the ones that, just being present, they didn't really do anything. They didn't have to make me meals or do my laundry or anything. They just listened and took a ton of grace on me through my tough times.
So you don't have to have all the right words. You don't have to do anything necessarily. You just need to show up and be present and kind of sit in solidarity in the sadness.
Absolutely. And I know people are so afraid to say things, but I applaud the people that do. I really do, because some things people said to me and I was like, why on earth would you say that? But the reality is they said something. They made that step, and you going through it and being where I am now in this peaceful state, I thank them for that, because they didn't give up. They kept trying. Even if they said the most god-awful thing, they kept trying. And that to me meant more than someone just not being there at all.
Totally. Okay, so you bring Riley home, and that's not the end of the challenges. It's kind of just the beginning. And Riley had a health journey that was complicated and difficult. And during that process, you learned about the very real challenges of being a good advocate for your kid, and especially when nurses and doctors disagree. So how did you use your voice and trust your gut in order to get the results that you knew Riley needed?
When we brought her home, she was having a little trouble with her bowel movements. And I had noticed that when she slept, she was very oddly still. So after talking to the doctor over the weekend and trying everything under the sun to get her to poop, they decided let's take her to Children's Hospital, admit her because she was a newborn. They didn't want her in the ER. And find out what the issue is, because they're like, if we send you to any old hospital, they're just going to get her to go to the bathroom and send you on your way. But we kind of want to figure out what's going on with the background we were in, all the risks Riley has health wise due to my pregnancy and delivery. They wanted to play it safe. So when she was 5 days old, we went to Children's Hospital of Orange County. And were admitted in, and they said expect to stay 2 days because they always like to have them stay the night just in case. Well, within 7 hours, they got her to go. There was not a problem. She was just a little plugged up. Everything was good. Awesome. So we went to bed that night. I stayed at the hospital, and they hook her up to monitors because she's in the hospital. And I saw every 20 seconds her respiratory would bottom out to 0. And she would go a amount of time without breathing, and then she would kick back up. And this is happening every 20 seconds. Her alarm's going off. So I tell the nurse says, oh, newborns are like that. They twitch, she told me. So that sets off the alarm. And so I couldn't believe it because I'm staring at her. But the next morning they come in and say they want to keep her one more night. And that night it goes off again. So now we have a mama bear that hasn't slept in 48 hours because an alarm is going off every 20 seconds that my child's not breathing. So by that morning, the rounds start happening with the doctors. And I said, I don't know who I need to talk to, but I will not stop yelling until I get someone in here to check her breathing. And I remember just tears flowing on my eyes. I was exhausted, overwhelmed. So they agreed that they would send someone in. And at that point, I was getting conference called into the funeral service place for Ava to make her arrangements. So I couldn't even be there for that. So I was in a state of feeling like I couldn't be there for Ava because I had to be at the hospital with Riley. There was a lot going on. And I remember praying to God, like, God, you got to guide me through this. I don't know what's going on, but I can't lose her. I can barely manage what I'm doing. And the doctor came in, they did a sleep study on Riley and found out that when she falls asleep, her body would forget to breathe. So something we take for granted so easily that when we fall asleep, that our body just naturally kicks into mode of breathing, Riley's did not. So at that point, they ran a lot of tests on her. There are several reasons that could happen. It could due to a heart defect, which was what they really thought could be. Another one is her brainstem not forming correctly at the time, being undergrown, which was the most possible thing due with all the damage that could have been done during Ava's loss. So they ran all these tests and they kept coming back negative. At that point, they said due to process of elimination, the only thing left is it's a disease called CCHS. It's where the body doesn't have the ability to remind itself to breathe when you're sleeping. So you have to be put on a ventilator while you sleep. And when you're awake, you can breathe, but you would need a tracheotomy at this age for her. So we got that news. And at 11 days old, she went in for a tracheotomy and was put on a ventilator. I couldn't tell you where the strength came from to watch her get wheeled away that day to the OR. But seeing her come out on so many machines was probably one of the scariest moments of my life.
And that wasn't the only fight that you had to engage in. Was it a year and a half of really having to advocate and show up on behalf of your kid in order to get her the care that she needed? But there have been some tremendous outcomes. And will you give us an update on where Riley is now and some of the things that are happening in Children's Hospital in Orange County because of Riley's journey?
Yeah, so one night I was with Riley in the NICU and she was awake and it was like midnight. No one was awake. And she had to have been a few weeks old at this point. And she was looking at me and I asked her, because at this point we hadn't had the results. There's a test you can do for this disease. And the only lab that runs it's like in Michigan, and we lived in California. So the time frame was like 4 weeks return on this positive, but they were set and diagnosed her without it because there was nothing else it could be. And I looked at her and I said, "You already know God's plan, don't you?" And she smiled. And I said, "You don't have this, do you? You don't have this disease that they say, do you?" And she smiled again. And that was kind of felt like God's affirmation that she was here to change the world. She was here to change something, that the pain I was going through with Ava's loss and with this, like that there was a change happening that I wasn't even aware of. And whether she had gas or not, that's what I took from it. I put her down. She went to bed. I went home. And I woke up, my husband told her she doesn't have this. And he said, "You got results in the middle of the night?" And I said, "No, God gave me the results." And he looked at me like, "You need to sleep." And so I went in the next morning. I took my oldest to preschool. And as I'm heading into the hospital, I walk in saying hi to all the nurses. At that point, I was known by all at the hospital. And I see about 9 doctors in her room. I panic. I instantly drop my purse on the floor and just start bolting towards her room. And the charge nurse stops me like, no, Amanda, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I'm like, "There's a million people. Looks like a Grey's Anatomy episode in her room. Like, what's happening?" And they said, "She's getting better." And I said, "What do you mean she's getting better?" And they said, "She is fighting the vent. She's breathing on her own when she's sleeping." I couldn't believe it. And there's these residents taking notes and the doctors are using all this lingo I don't understand. And I pushed my way through and there's my little girl just staring at them off the ventilator, minding her business. And I couldn't believe it. Within a week, the ventilator was rolled out of her room. She no longer needed it. We had continued to keep the trach because the doctors were so dumbfounded by her recovery and the fact that she shouldn't have recovered, that they were afraid of taking it out because what if she needed it again? Like, what if she relapsed? So there was a big fight with that because I wanted the trach out. I was like, if she doesn't need it, if she's not on it, why do we have it? And so they ran through the risks of taking it out so young and everything that would go along with that. So that's when we started researching and truly being her advocate and following my gut of what God was telling me to do. She was a light eater. She didn't like to eat a ton. She liked to eat more often, but at the hospital, they have rules every 3 hours and a certain amount of ounces. And that's what you do. And she was throwing it all up. She wasn't gaining weight. And I remember them telling me she was going to need a G-tube. And at that point, I just felt this fire inside me. And I remember telling them, I said, "No, you're not going to stick another foreign hole in her that God did not put there for something that I feel like we can do." And so I signed like 3 waivers to allow them not to give her the amount of food that they were giving her and to allow me to feed her and to give her the amount that I thought was right. And she started gaining. So at 6.5 weeks old, they let me take her home with the approval of the GI doctor follow-ups to make sure she continued to gain. I went to the first GI doctor follow-up and the woman said that she needed a G-tube. And I said, "Not yet. She's still gaining, not at the likelihood that you guys want her to, but she's still gaining." And so when I went back to that doctor, that doctor decided like if I wasn't going to do it, there was no reason to see her. I would have to see another doctor. So then I went to another GI doctor and that doctor pretty much said, "You need to give her this. If you don't, you're a bad mom." And I remember those words just like a stab in the heart. And I didn't fall apart though. I remember looking her straight in the eye and I said, "I know what's best for my daughter. And if she is gaining weight, if I see that number keep going up, whether it's an ounce or a pound, we are not doing this to her. She needs it." And they said, babies with trachs don't eat. They can't taste. They don't have the fire to do it. They don't understand why they do it. You need to do this. And I said, "No, not until I see that scale go down." So I went to another GI doctor the next time and he looked at her. He didn't look at a chart. He didn't look at thing. He looked at me. He looked at my nurse that was there to help me, talked to the nurse about how I care for her, and looked at her all the way down to her diaper and said, she may be underweight. She may be in the second percentile or not even on the chart at this point. But you're right. She is gaining each time we see her. And she has the chunks in the right places, right on the thighs and the arms. And then she has a little bit, but it's, not significant, but it's there. He's like, until I feel like she looks malnutritioned, we're going to move forward with what you're doing. And I said, okay. And that was my first positive support from a GI doctor. And at 10 months old, she got discharged from the GI doctor because she got up to 30 percentile in weight. She did it on her own. She is the only 10-month-old that I have ever known to finish a frozen Trader Joe's mac and cheese on her own.
That is impressive. I'm 40 and I can't.
Right? Let me tell you, people should have took stock in that mac and cheese when she was that little, because that was her jam.
So cute.
But fighting, and in this process of the GI situation, there was also her respiratory and fighting for them to focus on, because they would say her sleep studies show this. But what I finally found out, because we decided to sit down with the entire panel of the pulmonologists at Children's Hospital, because we wanted her to come home. We wanted her to be a kid. And they were struggling with not knowing the answer. So I remember sitting with them, the panel in there, and that was when I realized that they were measuring her up to adult sleep studies, because that's all they have. And I said, have we ever done any research on babies and like their sleep studies? And they kind of fought back on me, like, this is what we have. This is science. This is real. And I said, have we ever thought that that my child could have been a SIDS baby, that's what she has, but we caught it. And that we can use this to better what we know. And one doctor who ended up being her pulmonologist perked his interest a little bit. The others got really frightened when I mentioned it, because there was no scientific backing to it. And I said, this is your chance. This is your chance to give it something. You guys can't diagnose her with anything because you don't know what it is, but we have this chance of studying it and understanding. And so that was like a 2-hour meeting of different things with her. Through all that, we went on this long journey. At 14 months, she got decannulated, which is getting the trach taken out. And in April of 2017, we went to our pulmonologist, and he came in and we had our last sleep study. And he said, I don't see any reason to continue with this. She's a happy, healthy little girl now. And she's doing great. And that to me was just this she'll have annual checkups because she'll always have scar tissue from her trach. But other than that, we don't see this ever relapsing. And he looked at me and he said, I think you are right that she could have been a SIDS baby. And it's scary for us to say that as doctors because we don't have proof. He's like, but I want you to know all the fighting you did for her. Not only was he proud that I did that for Riley, but he said that that I challenged those doctors into questioning things. And because of that challenge, that Children's Hospital got funded for research on baby sleep studies. So they are now going into research to find the sleep patterns of babies and what is normal and what is not. And hopefully that will reach a conclusion to possibly SIDS or more, or maybe come up to a conclusion of what happened to Riley and what that real diagnosis looks like.
Such a powerful story of full circle impact, and in a very small way, a restoration of seeing other babies being able to thrive because of the pain in your story. And I just love every time I hear it, recognizing that it took you fighting and trusting your gut and really standing up. And so what would you say to other parents out there who, when put in those situations, kind of feel like shrinking back or not saying what they think they need to say?
I would say, don't be afraid to be the person God made you to be. I couldn't tell you how many times people would hear the fight I was in and say, why would you fight the doctors? They went to college. They did all these studying. Like, what makes you think you know more? I've gotten people look at me crazy because I had a little trach baby and she loved the water. So her first birthday, we did it at a splash pad zone, terrifying it as all get out. But that was her. She was there to be a child, to have fun, to enjoy her life. And if that made my life harder and more difficult, that's okay, because I was her mom and God gave me that strength. And that's why she was mine, because I had the strength to do it. Did I have to always have two sets of eyes on her while she was in the water, and two medical machines next to us just in case of emergency, in an ambu bag, which is not normal to carry around? Absolutely. But God gives you the strength to be the parent you're supposed to be. So whatever he puts on your plate, no matter what the end result or what you're afraid of, he's given you the tools. You just may not know what they are yet. And you just got to follow that deep feeling you have and know that's him speaking to you and telling you and guiding you. And I feel like if I didn't just let go of the controls, that I would, Riley wouldn't be Riley. Riley would probably still have a G-tube right now, because those are difficult to get rid of once they're on it. She would probably have not walked at 9 months. Or, be talking the way she is. They thought she was going to be underdeveloped, and she wasn't. They thought she, would have speech issues and have years of speech therapy, but she didn't. She learned to talk with a trach and then had to relearn to talk without the trach. She was resilient and she had strength. And I don't know if it's because I had strength or if she gave me the strength. But either way, we feed off of each other in that way. And, so I would say, like, the best advice you can give someone in these situations is be the mom you were meant to be the dad you were meant to be. And don't be afraid of other people's judgments, because in the end, their judgments will not matter.
That's so good. Okay, my favorite question to ask. What's the best advice you never got?
It's okay to still have a life. Everybody, when they would talk to me, was always like, how's Riley doing? How's this? How are you feeling? It was always about the kids, which I loved. But I always, if I spent time away or wanted to go on a date night, I always felt guilty for wanting to continue with my life. And so, I would have loved someone to say, it's okay to live. It's okay to continue. Because it is. My journey was hard and it was tough. But with having identical twins and what happened to Ava and Riley surviving, that changed the scope of that 40% that they told me. That lowered that percentage. Ava's passing and me outreaching to people and people getting to talk about this, she changed people's lives. She wasn't even present for 18 weeks in the womb, and she changed people's lives. And then there's Riley, who went through this huge fight that, she's been in more procedures and surgeries than some of us in an adult age. And she came out the most happiest kid. That girl has a smile that just melts your heart. And she has the energy of no one I have ever seen. And it's just, a blessing. And she changed the map. She changed the way those doctors looked at things. Those next parents are going to get more information than I ever had. And that's a blessing. She fought for those other little babies that are about to come into this world. And, it's okay to move on. It's okay to feel the blessing. And that could be years, that could be days. And either one is okay. Don't put a timer on it. Don't do that. But it's okay to move forward.
Man, I love that advice. Okay, last question. What are you doing right now in your life to cultivate more fun?
So I have always wanted to go on a mission, but it's always been a passion in my mind. I've always heard people's stories about them and the amazing times they've had with it. And I've always found a reason why I couldn't go. I've used excuses about my own health. I'm starting college. I'm starting my career. But right now I'm starting a family. And then, of course, the health of my family. But I realize that there's never a right time to enjoy life because there's always things on your to-do list to mark off. So I finally decided to take the jump this year and go on a mission trip to Kenya. So I'm super excited.
Woo woo! And you're going for
Yes.
a long time. It's not just like a quick little stop.
No, I'll be gone for 2 weeks in a small village in Kenya. And
leading VBS for 450 kids.
Yes, that was a bit of a surprise, but absolutely. Yeah, so we'll get to not only do that, but something that really called to my heart, which I think is why I kind of leaped on it, was this village out there. The closest labor and delivery room and emergency room they have is 40 miles away, and they don't have vehicles. They walk. So obviously when you're in labor, you're not going to want to walk 40 miles to get healthcare and have a nurse with you. So the government has said that if we were to build an ER and a labor and delivery room, that they will staff it for the tribes out there. So we are going out there to build this. So that to me is huge. The support I had in the hospital changed my life, and I couldn't imagine trying to do it on my own. And these women are doing it on their own. So to give them that ability is amazing and exciting. And I can't wait to see how God uses me there and the fun I'll have in just learning this culture and this new dynamic.
Yay, can't wait to hear all about your trip. Thank you so much for sharing about your story with such bravery and vulnerability. I think there are parents around the globe who are going to find restoration and wholeness through your story. Hey, thanks so much for listening. I just want to let you know I so appreciate getting to spend time with you. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Have More Fun podcast. And now, go out and have more fun, and don't come back until you do.